So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, let me introduce Sue to start kickoff today. Sue, the microphone's
Okay,
all yours.
I'll just share my screen if that's okay. Oops. And we'll go for the slideshow. Oops. Back a bit. There we go. So welcome to our BESIG weekend webinar. We're going to look at what we did in our EVO session, which took place between the beginning of January and the beginning of February, which was really, really great fun. We decided to work on designing materials for BE, which was decided on by a group of BESIG volunteers, because we thought that that would actually be the most useful thing that we could offer our colleagues and other people who perhaps hadn't yet started in business English, but who would like to have a bit of a lift. And the reason for doing it was that the people needed to move online. And people were moving online without having any robust ideas of how to make their lessons work. So we needed to take the materials that we had, make them more relevant, turn them into things that had visual impact, and at the same time be able to save time, because we all know that when we're making materials, that time is of the essence. And we just don't want to be in a position where we're spending hours and hours creating material. So what we decided to do was quite interesting, because in EVO, what they do is they very often make lessons where each week follows a very set pattern. And in our plan, we decided that each week would stand alone. Each week would have its own distinguishing feel about it, but that every week would have an underlying part that gathered pace as the 5 weeks went on. So in the first week, we had a chat with Evan Friendlow. And Evan Friendlow was delighted to be asked, which was really, really excellent. And he provided us with a video that allowed us to look at the kind of materials that were out there already. And then he gave me an idea to put together a PowerPoint on the different skills needed in business English and things to think about if you wanted best practice. In week 2, we had a fantastic week looking at copyright. Now, I think that was an eye-opener for many people. They really had no idea that you couldn't just go online and help yourself to anything you found. And that was a particularly important thing, because that led into week 3, where we were looking at special educational needs with Martin Bloomfield, who is himself dyslexic. And again, that was the most fantastic week of learning for all the teachers. By the time we finished, we had little strategies that we could use to do all sorts of things. But again, we understood about copyright by this time, so that followed into the idea of working with special needs. And then we had the most amazing work with designing infographics. And infographics in such a way that they were given over to the students for their learning. Week 4 was looking at tweaking material, or recycling material might be more correct, really. And we looked at both speaking and writing. And week 5 was a fantastic week of discussing how business games can actually build learning. And they're not just there for fun, they're actually there for a really important purpose, particularly if they can be material that comes from the learners themselves. And we finished with a very nice show and tell. So The first week was really an introduction, and the introduction was there because we started off with no week that was just for registrations. So as people were coming in, they were learning about the material at the same time. And this is where most of our participants came from. You'll see that there's a huge number based in Europe and Belarus, Russia, Germany, France. Again, we had quite a few from different parts of the Americas, America itself, Mexico. I think Grace found 3 or 4 people that were Mexicans, Peru, Brazil, all over the place, and a few outliers from places where there were just 1 or 2 people. But it was a really, really good course, and it started with a huge number of people. So we started off with about 257 participants. What we hadn't realised was that by making our course into a bit where some weeks had 2 parts to it, it actually became quite heavy, and some people just couldn't manage at that point. And for other people, they were starting to get back into the classroom. And so we didn't finish with the 257, but we did finish with quite a good number. And they were all really happy to get started. When we looked at the first video, Evan Frendo put together an idea of what material was out there, and some of it was actually new to the teachers themselves. So he then offered extra help from his website. So people are going away with other material on top of what we were offering in the course itself. At the end of the week, we asked our participants to provide a telephone task, but the telephone task was relevant to their business. So it didn't really matter what kind of work you're in business English. It was going to be designed by you for your own students. And the feedback was very, very good. And I think the feedback in the first week set the tone for the interaction and collaboration that went on all the rest of it. And, oops. Here is a little bit that was done by one of the participants. This one came from Rory Bradell, and he thought that his business was actually more likely to be using virtual meetings. And so he was looking at the remote needs. He had a vocabulary. He put together a really, really good lesson. And it was a very, very well put together course, but it gave the people who weren't business teachers lots of material that they could take away and try out in the classroom themselves. I can now hand you over happily to the people who were in charge of week 2, which is Uma and where has...
I'm here.
Yeah, you're there.
Thank you, Sue.
Okay.
Thank you so much. I hope you can hear me well. Great. So yes, week 2. In the second week of the course, we looked at texts, copyright, and adaptation. The first part of the week was devoted to copyright and Creative Commons licenses, and the second to free online tools we can use to design tasks from texts and videos we find online. The input part was presented with short videos and interactive slides. For the interactive and reflective part of the course, of the session, we asked the participants to contribute their experiences with copyright and online tools in the discussion forum and comment on each other's posts. This week culminated in an assignment that required the participants to demonstrate an understanding of copyright laws and Creative Commons licenses. First, the participants had to search in open educational resources for licensed material. Then they had to describe what the license allowed, expected, or restricted them from doing with the material. They had to report back on the process in detail, explaining whether they needed to attribute the author, whether the material could be modified or used commercially, and the conditions under which they could share it, where sharing was possible, that is. The third step was to choose one of the online tools previously suggested by Uma Tadema for work with texts or by Ricardo Bruns for work with videos. Finally, they could apply, if they wanted, a Creative Commons license to their creation and upload it to Canvas. Can I have the next slide, please? Thank you. Great. I'm happy to say that most participants demonstrated achievement of the week's learning objectives quite impressively, although not without facing a few challenges along the way, like Sue mentioned earlier. Here you can see an example of a successful task submission on the left. However, some participants embarking on this quest to find licensed and usable material quickly discovered there wasn't much out there they could freely and legally use. More crucially, they became aware that sources they had previously relied upon were in fact off limits, protected by copyright in the most restrictive way, which is the all rights reserved. In those cases, the same question would come up again and again. I can't find any mention of a license on that website, article, video, etc. Can I still use it? And that was when they were reminded that every creation is by default protected by copyright law without needing the author to take any additional action. Let me just repeat this for emphasis. Every creation is by default protected by copyright laws. So, unless otherwise explicitly stated, I'm afraid the answer is no, we can't use it. But it wasn't all bad, of course. Through this experiential learning and interaction, we were all inspired, moderators included, to further research national copyright laws, fair use, and the latest legal updates on hyperlinking and embedding. I am optimistic that after this learning journey, we will all keep looking for the small print before selecting something off the internet to use in our lessons. In addition to these learnings, a concrete takeaway for the participants was a downloadable PDF with all the links shared in the forum during that week. You can see a screenshot of one of the pages here on the right. That 5-page PDF, full of links to online tools and resources, was put together by Kirsten. So thank you for that, Kirsten, for all the hard work and support throughout. It wasn't just the participants, however, that came out of this experience with learnings and takeaways. As designers and moderators for week 2, Uma and I met several times in preparation. In those meetings, we had to make some tough decisions. Offer a balance of familiar and relatively new content, cut quite a few things from our session to make it more manageable, make sure to avoid overload. In retrospect, we could have followed a less is more approach. The copyright information alone might have been enough for that week. And we loved our collaboration, didn't we, Uma? Once you find a partner on the same wavelength, the whole project doesn't feel like work at all. Your partner at times serves as your sounding board and helps you stay focused. We learned quite a lot at every single stage, from planning to designing to giving feedback. But most of all, we stepped out of our comfort zones. We both feel this was a fantastic way to give back something to the incredibly generous teaching community. A huge thank you to Sue, Kirsten, and the whole team for giving us this opportunity. I would like now to give the floor to week 3, which was Kathleen and Grace. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Vicky. And I would like to use this opportunity to also highlight how important it was to pay attention to the instructional design. So that means that not only the content that had to be digested, but we realized, and I think there my thank you to all the people involved in this teamwork, and especially to Vicky as our instructional designer, that we managed to create a design surface, and also with regard to the layout of the individual tasks that helped the learners to move forward, because especially around week 3 we knew from further EVO experiences, and Sue described that at the beginning of her introduction too, that people started to drop out. So apart from instructional design, we realized a second thing, and that is offering a live session. And we were very happy that with week 3, which focused on visual elements and inclusive materials, we got a well-known external expert, Martin Bloomfield, and he was a British Council Elton's finalist with his website Dyslexia Bites. And his live session offered an opportunity to the participants to interact with the other participants, to interact with the moderators, with a presenter of a very complex material. And we realized how important these live sessions are when offering such a course over a time period of 5 weeks. Martin Bloomfield managed to keep this interactive mood by choosing exercises which were game-based. So the participants who may never have been in contact with any dyslexic learners, they may not have been aware of having learners with dyslexia or any other special educational needs, they had a kind of journey of self-awareness and reflection, and could share this experience with other participants based on these game-based things. So there was, for example, a quiz focusing on statistics with regard to dyslexic students, and there was also a combination of how dyslexic thinking and images are related, which was a nice transfer to the second part of the week Grace is going to talk about. Could you move on, Sue? So we realized that this interaction, this link between the content and collaboration was essential to help the participants to put these things into practice. And Martin Bloomfield offered his website materials, he offered the YouTube materials, and picked things that were essential for this small amount of time that we had. And the participants could walk away with a kind of toolbox, and they realized that already small changes with regard to designing business English material could make a huge difference for all the learners in their courses. Could you move on, please? And here's an example offered by Elizabeth Mackey. She used a visual representation of the statistical material that Martin offered in his Quizlet about dyslexia, and she organized all the information that she got, how things are in reality and how things should be if people and all the stakeholders involved in this complex topic would be better informed and would at least make tiny changes with regard to the way they teach, and and how they could have an impact on their learners' well-being and how they could make learning progress. Thank you. I'll hand over now to my colleague, Grace.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. Well, I was in charge of the second part of this third week, and I was in charge of presenting and moderating the topic of infographics. We started by discussing the importance of incorporating infographics not only as a pedagogical tool, but also as a way of training our students how to deal with them in their everyday activities at work. You know that infographics now are an important part of most business and academic materials. So after that, we presented 3 different, very user-friendly platforms that could help teachers create their own infographics, and in that way make content easier to read and remember for their students. Many teachers found this especially useful as they were not familiar with the design of infographics and thought it was terribly difficult to design one. And really these tools are very practical and useful, and you can have a high quality product when you work with them. Later, we explained how students could get involved in the use of ready-made infographics and in the design of infographics as well. And in that way, fostering different types of abilities, right? Of skills like critical thinking in the case of using ready-made infographics, or creativity in the case of designing their own infographics. And of course, in all the circumstances, it was clear that we were working on language development as well. We also shared some activities as a model and as participants to give feedback on them, telling us how they could use them in their own context, how they could adapt them, how they could improve on them. And finally, we invited participants to share their own activities or infographics, and well, to have this exchange of ideas and collaboration, in the group. I could say that this part of the week, as the rest of the course, was very enriching for everyone. I mean, participants, moderators, presenters, everyone. There was a high level of interest in the topic, and also a high level of collaboration and interaction, which made it really practical, because we could get ideas from other participants. There were many inspiring ideas and activities, and we could create, also thanks to Kirsten, a pool of resources and activities that everyone can use now. I would say that in general, my conclusion is that we could discover how infographics can provide students with a change in the pace of the lesson, how they can spice up our materials. And also we could see how versatile they can be, because they can be used to develop any kind of skill, any topic, including grammar, and also to foster the development of different work competencies that students, business English students, need to develop. Here you have an example of some of the infographics that were used to create activities, and I would like to comment that it was very nice to see how participants refer to in these activities, refer to topics that are really current in business, like corporate social responsibility, global issues, sustainability, which shows how adaptable they can be and how practical its use can be. Okay, I think that's all I have to tell you at the moment. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them at the end of the session.
And now we have Kirsten.
Yes. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, good. So I'm very sorry. I'm joining you from the train, from the ICE. So if my sound breaks up, it's not because I don't want to talk to you, but I'm currently at Frankfurt Airport traveling back. So, okay, and I think Rachel can possibly best talk about her own part if you're going to make her co-host. I don't know if she's co-host already. Yes, Vicky, please do that. And then I think it's actually easier and it's fairer because Rachel was a part of the second part of week 2. So in week 2, we decided that we would look at tweaking materials. And the first half was my part. So what I decided on was actually telling people better how to organize work, how to organize and recycle exercises, how to revise the materials they already have, so to save time. If you live in my country, in Germany, you get 35 to 50 euros for a lesson, if you're lucky. So if you can't afford financially to prepare 2 hours on a lesson or on exercises, so you have to learn to organize lessons better and to recycle lessons better. So that's basically what I did in the first part, and then Rachel took on with the second part with the writing. So can we just move on to the next slide, because I think Rachel's going to talk about her focus after me. And I was actually a little bit shocked and also overwhelmed at how little teachers seem to do that already, how little teachers actually seem to be recycling and revising lessons and organizing lessons in a way that they can quickly find them again. And then just like, with business English, just maybe replace the industry name or replace the name of a company, and then they can just use all their stuff on emails again. Or all their stuff on telephoning or speaking activities. And that was actually also great. So the key focus was really that we make sure the right language is used in the lessons, that the framework materials that Evan mentioned in the first week, that came in very, very handy. And that was also quite useful, so that people actually said, okay, with the framework, I can recycle lessons more easily. I can recycle activities more easily. And that was actually quite good. And then also the field of evaluation. So what we did, and maybe we just move on to the next slide here. So what we did was actually I created a list, a kind of checklist, where people could see how best to recycle this. So you can see this best in this example. Name of the activity, it's the description, what instructions do I give, what's the outcome, what's the purpose, and quite importantly, can it also work online or in a hybrid classroom? Because a lot of us don't really know how to transfer these things, and I think that's also quite important. And what makes things work online? So they had to learn to revise and check their own activity. And that's very, very good. Rachel, don't worry, we planned you in with the 5 minutes, so you can just do that. And that basically, how much time would it also take to adapt? And I think this is something that some participants found really difficult to deal with because they weren't used to that kind of structural design. But others found it very useful because they said it gives me a frame, it gives me something to really look forward to, because I can just reorganize things on my computer. I can use index search on my computer or something like this. I think the workload was okay. We were still adding to a lot of people who were still struggling with week 2 and 3, all the grades we did there. But I think overall, people really seem to take to this and enjoy this. So I think that's it from me. And I just hand over to Rachel, and maybe we go back to the introduction of week 4 for this. Sue?
Sue, are you going to speak, or did you want me to come straight in?
Just come straight in.
Right, okay, fine. Well, it's great to see so many people, so many participants here. And from all that I saw online when the course was taking place, I was overwhelmed with how much involvement there was, and many people who really took this task very seriously. And writing takes time. You can't run a class about writing unless you're really going to put the work in on paper, actually. Now, some of the tasks I was suggesting were using ready-made materials and how to lift those. And one of the examples I gave was a course book extract annotated, and how you could lift that online to make it accessible. So there were lots of ideas that people tried out here, using breakout rooms, using sticky notes, using Google Docs, lots of things that I think really bring these sort of pages to life, which you have to do if you're teaching online. So I don't want to say much more than that. I was really encouraged by what I saw, and I thought everybody worked really well. As I've put here, there was lots of detail in many of the posts, and there were different ways also that some of you looked at for how to get participants or students to respond to each other, so to react to each other, peer feedback and so on. And I'd like to thank the moderators, who I know worked really hard to encourage all the participation and to give really very meaningful and valuable feedback. So I'll leave it there. That's fine. Thank you very much for being involved, and for those who participated, well done. Congratulations.
Okay, I think what people really appreciated in the writing part, can we go to the example?
Yeah, it's there.
Was also this, that it was very, very focused. It was very useful for people to work on things and to really transfer the ideas from a textbook to something that they do on their own. And I think nearly every one of us teaches email writing. And so that is one example where it was about emails of complaint. And then Kathy Schwendner came up with this CRAP acronym: Situation, Complication, Resolution, and Action, and Politeness. And we chose this because it resonated so well with the participants. Everybody responded to this and said, oh, I'm going to adapt this, I'm going to use this. And I think this was also, especially in week 4, fantastic, because people just formed a community and started building materials together. I think that's basically where we went like, okay, we're going to get a winner course here, because everything was just falling into places. So everything we learned about copyright, and we learned about special educational needs and infographics. You've seen this infographic about the business emails earlier on, just came together when people started designing these activities and tweaking these activities in week 4. So that I think also Rachel did a great job there in pushing people to work with this, giving them also other formats like business reports and so on they could choose from. So there was also a wide variety, and she also shared a lot of her experience from her teaching courses, which participants just found very, very useful. So I think that's it from week 4. So I'd just like to hand over to Andrea for week 5.
Right. So in week 5, we focused on using gamification and games in the business English classroom. I chose this topic because when people think of business English, they think of something very serious, and they see students wearing ties and suits and something very sober, and it doesn't have to be that way. People spend a whole day at work, and they come to English classes sometimes just to relax. So being playful and using games and gamification can really spice up any class, no matter how late in the evening or early in the morning they might happen. Next slide, please. So we started by thinking, by asking the question, are you a gamer? And most people are tempted to say no in this case, because when saying gaming and gamers, most of us think of video games. But it's not really true. Everybody plays games or has played a game at some point in their lives. And I just wanted all the participants to remember the games they played and why they played them, what they found engaging about these games, what motivated them to play or to win. So after, that everybody contributed, everybody was very generous, and it turned out that many people could play many, many games. I asked them to identify the game mechanics and dynamics from a game of their choice. And again, everybody did very, very well. This all was an awareness activity. So on one hand, I wanted people to realize that everybody can play a game. On the other hand, I wanted them to understand what are the elements of the games that motivate people. And of course, to show that, games can motivate people. They're not just for fun. So then we tried out different apps and tools, and everybody was really thrilled about this. Everybody tried out new tools and shared. To be honest, I even saved a lot of ideas and activities myself, and I added them to my awesome activities Padlet. One thing I would change about the content of this session would be maybe not to focus so much on the tools and apps, but rather on, why to use them. So start with the why rather than with the what. So maybe I would focus a bit more on defining goals and objectives of instruction rather than using the apps themselves. Also, I wish I had been a bit more clear about the difference between play, games, and gamification of learning. Many of the activities weren't necessarily gamified activities, but they were just games for learning, like as in play. So maybe I would insist a bit more on that. Otherwise, I was impressed. Everybody already had so much experience, so many games and links were shared. Like I said many of these myself. And it was a wonderful opportunity to interact with people from literally all continents, almost all continents. I don't think we have Australia. That was really a very rewarding experience. And I learned a lot. I hope they learned a lot. Actually, I would like to ask if there are here any of the EVO participants. Have you been using all the things you learned during the EVO sessions after the course ended? Have you been using them in the classroom? Not just the games, the infographic activities, all of that. It would be great if you could share that in the chat, because that's how you see the impact. That's how you measure the impact of learning. All right, next slide, please. This is what the participants created. WordWall was very popular, maybe because it's got so many activities that you can create. These activities were created by Tatiana and Nika. Next slide, please. Okay. And sorry. All right. And but there were many more there. So if you go back to the discussion forums, you'll see that there's a treasure trove of activities that you can use tomorrow in the classroom. Yeah. So I guess that's all from me. Thank you.
Kirsten? I think these were ideas from all the moderators. Oops, let me start my video. And we picked up on ideas that even the experienced teachers came away with huge amounts of new material that they could put into practice immediately in their classrooms. And the new teachers, we did have teachers who were talking about getting into business English, who weren't yet business English teachers, but they felt confident about making material and trying it out in their classroom. There was a huge amount of tools and apps, which, as Vicky said earlier, Kirsten put together for us, and that was really, really well done. We looked at copyright and Creative Commons licenses, which really is a big problem if you don't get it right. And these days, it's so easy to find out how to use copyright correctly. We learned about people with special needs, particularly with dyslexia, in such a way that even if you don't know you have dyslexics in your classroom, you now have the tools to make the classroom a better experience for all your students, and that will help the ones who do have problems who don't want to tell you about them. The feedback from everybody was really impressive. We had moderators from all different parts of the globe, which meant that some of them were working at night when everybody else was sleeping, and that was really, really useful. The presenters were fantastic, and the participants were really, really good. And we decided that teachers should never stop learning. Really, really important. Here's a little bit from Andrea again.
All right, so This is an example from Anastasia. Some feedback on the tasks. Just 1 second. So the first task was meant to boost guessing skills and see the model of a possible short or Skype phone call. And then in the second task, students had to focus on functional language and on noticing. The third task that she designed was to meet her students' needs as they had trouble with pronunciation. And the focus of the lesson was pronunciation, obviously. And then her suggestion was that it would be productive to devise a final task to improve communication and make up their own dialogues and role play with the peer student. Next slide.
And here are some of our testimonials. Now, these testimonials actually came when I sent out the certificates. As I said at the beginning, we sent out 82 certificates, which is a stupendous number. People were happy with what we offered them. Lots of people saying it was excellent, and the people that actually used it in class were able to report back that their students were happy with it. There's another one putting the work into practice already, and we were asked at the EVO, the Best of EVO sessions, whether we would offer it again because it was so successful, and why not? We might. We generally do something like this every second year, but if everybody's interested, we could certainly offer it next year. And now we have our questions and answers.
Okay, so we have a couple of questions, and the first one by Lynn is will the EVO course be run again? And if so, how can I find out about it, please? Or is there a recording of the training that we can watch?
Not really. But yeah, I mean, there is the possibility that we will run it again. If not, even if we leave it for 2 years, there will be something possibly along the same lines, because it's a very, very useful course. I really don't know. It would depend on what everybody else feels, if they want to give up their time next year. But it's a possibility. And to find out about the EVO sessions, very often they start putting out information round about the beginning of December, I think. They start disseminating it on social media quite widely. So just watch out for the ideas then.
Okay. We have another question by Lynn also. I'm really interested in learning more about helping dyslexics. I follow Martin Bloomfield on LinkedIn, and he's a great help. Catherine, do you know of any other way in which we can get more familiar with this topic?
Yes, I think Martin Bloomfield is an excellent source to have a look at. So there are both his website and his YouTube channel, and there's a huge amount of material to go through, and follow him on any other social media channels as well.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Because we don't seem to have any other questions at the moment.
There's a question about a certificate. I don't know if it was answered. Do we get a certificate of attendance? Christina, do you mean for this webinar or for the EVO session?
I suppose for this webinar. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, we have already replied. And I would like to read, here is Maruza Pabli, who was one of our star participants, and She has just written something related to her participation in the course. I would like to read it. Maybe you have read it already in the chat. The course content and assignments were appropriate for both experienced and new business English teachers. I'm an experienced teacher and I've learned a lot through the course. New teachers will have a very good overview of various aspects of business English and a good starting point for their new interest. I highly recommend it to all teachers, old and new. Okay, I think that was the feeling among many of our participants. Yeah, even those who were experienced could find resources and ideas that could be very useful and could be incorporated the following day, yeah, into their classes. Okay.